All right, great. It looks as if the bulk of folks have finished the login process, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you here today for the webinar on hypothyroidism. Before we begin, if any of you are unfamiliar with the GoToWebinar control panel or have not used GoToWebinar before, you can access a number of audio controls there. If you're having a little difficulty hearing, you can access volume and audio controls that way. For those of you who have questions, there is a chat mechanism, and we encourage you to use that. Tressa will and I will try to facilitate answering as many of those questions at the end of the presentation as possible. And certainly would be any that we can't get to today, we'll be happy to follow up with via email. But we would love to get as much participation as possible, and we'll, like I said, we'll try to get to all of those at the end of the session. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Tressa and let her begin the presentation, Energy, Joy, Health, and Hypothyroidism.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today on hypothyroidism. I'm trying to give you an understanding of what hypothyroidism is and how maybe perhaps you've come to be hypothyroid. A lot of you maybe already have a diagnosis and are being treated. Other people might be suspicious that you are hypothyroid and be looking for some answers there. In brief, so I'm Tressa Brindle. I'm a functional medicine and Chinese medicine practitioner. I'm the founder and main practitioner at InHealth RVA, a functional medicine and Chinese medicine clinic. I got my start in medicine having been diagnosed at a pretty young age with a pretty severe autoimmune disorder. There was also a lot of other health problems in my family. So I spent about a decade or so or more in grad school and undergrad school and in research sciences and stress physiology research and neuroendocrine immunology research, looking for the answers for chronic health problems, inflammation, and autoimmunity. And from there, opened up my practice in 2012 and then moved it to Richmond in 2016. So today the goal and the underlying driver of InHealth RVA and in creating it, which started about 20 years ago now, has always been to give people real health solutions. Conventional medicine allows us to survive diseases, trauma, infections, but it doesn't give us a lot of really great solutions for wellness. It's not true health care. It's not dying from a disease or a trauma care. So functional medicine and what we do at InHealth RVA is try to really supply you with a personalized journey for true wellness. And so that's what we're going to really try to do today around the topic of hypothyroidism. Yeah, and as Derek said, I love questions, so write anything down that you've got and we'll have hopefully about 15 minutes at the end to go over them. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to talk about what it is. I'm going to give you the background to really understand how you get that way, how your thyroid gets low or hypo. I'm going to give you the details on what to do about it in your personal life right now before you even seek any professional help, and then also give you a quick lowdown on how we treat this in functional medicine. Okay, let's begin. What is hypothyroidism?
Tressa?
It is what it says. Yeah?
I think you need to share your screen.
Oh, I'm not sharing. Oh, goodness.
No worries.
Let's see. Which button is that, Derek?
The one that looks like a play button.
Thank you. Sorry, guys.
There you go. Now we got it.
There we go. Okay. All we missed was this outline slide and a little picture of your thyroid gland. And here we go. Okay, hypothyroidism. So essentially hypothyroidism, most diagnoses in conventional medicine as it's practiced familiar for most of us is descriptive and not diagnostic. So hypo means low, thyroid means thyroid, low thyroid function. This is often true of most diagnoses in conventional medicine. Irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, means your bowels are irritable. It doesn't tell you why. Arthritis, joint, itis, inflammation, joint inflammation. So in conventional medicine, the focus has been in sort of naming, identifying what the problem is, and then suppressing or trying to stop it from happening. In functional medicine, the focus is on again, still trying to understand where the dysregulation is, what the issue is. Your joints are inflamed, your bowels are irritable, your thyroid is low, but then always asking the question, why? It wasn't that way before. What are the variables that have led to creating that symptom or disease? So in understanding the why, I'm going to give you some background on some biology and physiology. So first, what does the thyroid do? What happens when it's working well? What happens when it's not? Most of us are familiar that fatigue, our metabolism, our weight, our body temperature, their fertility and menstruation, mood and cognition, and in children, as they develop, if their thyroid is low, they will have growth and brain development issues. So when it's good, usually we don't notice it. We have good energy and metabolism that responds to proper diet and exercise. Of course, even a healthy thyroid with improper diet and exercise, you'll still gain weight. Your mood will be balanced outside of other variables affecting it, fertility and your libido. Your bowel movements, as much as thyroid contributes to creating healthy, complete bowel movements every day, won't be affected. And then I'll just mention with all of these symptoms, it's never just one variable, or it's not usually often just one variable. So thyroid affects all of these health issues. It certainly isn't the only variable that would cause symptoms or disease or dysregulation in them. Thyroid is very important for cholesterol levels. Actually, a long time ago, I think about the 1960s, they would actually treat high cholesterol by giving people thyroid hormone. That created hyperthyroidism and made people very sick, so not a great idea. However, if your thyroid is low, that certainly is an important area to address if you tend to have high cholesterol numbers or heart disease in your family. Exercise recovery, feeling refreshed from it, having refreshing sleep, and having good sleep. Low thyroid function can go both ways. You can either just want to sleep all the time and it doesn't feel refreshing, or you can actually have trouble sleeping, and correcting low thyroid function will help you fall asleep and stay asleep better. It's also, of course, as I mentioned, important in libido and improper digestion. So when your thyroid is not working very well, the most common complaints people have are fatigue, weight gain, and cold intolerance. You'll also experience probably slower digestion, indigestion. People often will have hair loss. Mood can be affected, not getting enough thyroid hormone to the brain, low mood, depression. Dry skin, of course, sexual dysfunction, low libido, infertility in both men and women, menstrual changes. And a quick side note, it is always important in looking at fertility to consider the male here. Their hormones and nutrients and behavior significantly will affect fertility as a couple, and of course cardiovascular disease. I love this little cartoon. I think it pretty much sums it up. If you've been hypothyroid, you can probably identify with this lady here standing in the door after work. So, excuse me, as we dive into understanding why people get hypothyroid, the first thing to understand is that if your thyroid is dysregulated, if it is low, it probably is highly likely that there are other areas of your body, your biology, that are also dysregulated. And we cannot address and optimize your thyroid health and therefore your overall health if we don't understand what other areas could be driving it out of balance, or vice versa, being driven out of balance by it. So we're going to dive into talking about the neuroendocrine immune system. A lot of us might be familiar with the nervous system, the endocrine system, which is hormones, and the immune system, but really what we're going to talk about is this is all one system. So the thyroid is part of the endocrine or hormone system, but to truly be healthy and well and have a healthy functioning thyroid, we need to look at this as one system. And then we'll talk specifically about a subsidiary of the endocrine or hormone system, which is the hypothalamus pituitary thyroid axis. And we're just going to give you a little understanding of this, and it will really empower you to understand how to heal and have a healthy thyroid and feel healthy overall. So here we go, Neuroendocrine Immunology 101. So this little dog is here to give us some support as we talk about this subject. So the nervous system, so the immune system, we think about with inflammation and fighting infections, The nervous system, we think about the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves throughout our body, and the endocrine system, the hormone system. These are one integrated system. They have different primary structures and messenger molecules, and we're going to go over this in the next slide. The really important thing in understanding overall health and thyroid function is that these messengers are shared amongst the whole system. They create a coordinated response to our environment. So the nervous system, immune system, endocrine system are constantly communicating with their messenger molecules, their chemical messengers, in order to create a coordinated response to environmental stimuli. And when I say environment, this can be internal stimuli as well as outside of our body, external stimuli. And dysregulation in any one of these systems can have rippling effects into all the other systems if our body is not able to bring it back into balance. So in Neuroendocrine Immunology 101, here's the basic structures of it. Let's start at the bottom since we're thinking about this one the most today. The endocrine system. The thyroid is part of the endocrine, or a lot of us will just call it the hormone system. Its chemical communicator, its messenger is hormones. The major structure of the endocrine system are glands. The thyroid is a gland. Your ovaries or testicles are a gland, and they secrete hormones. Examples of some of these hormones secreted by glands are the thyroid hormones, thyroxine and triiodothyronine. That is T4 and T3 respectively, as you might see on your lab tests. Also cortisol, secreted by the adrenal glands. Estrogen and testosterone, which are secreted by our gonads, our testes or ovaries. Its job is to regulate our metabolism, reproduction, blood pressure, body temperature. A lot of really, really basic things that we take for granted are regulated by our hormones. Being able to go from a sitting position to a standing position without having all your blood stay in your feet and pass out is an instantaneous coordinated response dominated by your hormones. Created and by your hormones mostly. Okay, what else is going on in here? We have your nervous system. A lot of people know about neurotransmitters in our brain. Nerves, as we think about in our brain, but then also as they go throughout our whole body, secrete neurotransmitters in order to communicate. And actually the nervous system has a lot of electrical signal for communication. And here's some example of some of those neurotransmitters. And they, in our brain, help control mood and cognition and movement. And then the immune system. This will be very important in thyroid health. A lot of us are probably now familiar with the chemical messenger used primarily by, the primary chemical messenger is used by the immune system, as the cytokine storm has been in the news a lot with COVID. Cytokines are just basically the immune system saying, hey, I think I feel a threat. I think I perceive a threat. I need to go talk to these immune cells, tell them to go do their job and take care of this real or perceived threat. Those are some examples of some cytokines: TNF alpha, interleukin 2, 6, 8, 12, and the response is inflammation. So inflammation is we kind of in the 21st century have sort of recognized that inflammation is a part of basically all disease processes. And this at first seemed revolutionary to understand this, but really it's kind of basic. Basically what inflammation is, when you have inflammation in your body, it is your body perceiving a threat and taking action through the immune system in order to resolve that threat. So if you have inflammation, a flu, a swollen knee, it's your immune system actually trying to take care of you. So if we kind of listen to why, or we try to ask why it's inflamed, then we can help the body out by helping get rid of whatever that trigger was. Okay, so here we go. We have the combined neuroendocrine immune system talking to each other with their different chemical messengers. A stimulus comes into our body. They're all talking to each other, coordinating and creating a coordinated response. So that's basically what's happening every second of our day to keep us awake, to be flushing blood and lymphatics through our system, adjusting our blood pressure, our body temperature, our metabolism. It's pretty wondrous. All right, so having this basic understanding, the whole point is that we get health problems when we cannot create an appropriate coordinated response to our environment. If there's too much stimuli, negative stimuli, or too severe stimuli, And so what do we do in order to heal it? We need to identify these variables that have created dysregulation. So if you're hypothyroid now, you didn't used to be, what are these stimuli that have overstressed your system? Let's identify them and get rid of them. And then of course, sometimes we need to give some extra support. The systems might not be able to return back to balance without some extra support, even once you remove the overwhelming stimuli. So let's go specifically to the thyroid, how it is regulated in the body. At this point, if we were in person, I'd stop, I'd look at your looks on your faces, assess whether or not this is good or you're just all glazed over. But so we'll just take a quick breath, integrate that information and move on now to the thyroid. Okay, so the thyroid is a main part of the endocrine system. It is a gland, you see it here in your neck. It is just one of many glands in your body that secrete hormones. These glands are controlled in the brain by the hypothalamus and the pituitary. Specifically, the hypothalamus will send a signal, this TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone. It sends its messenger to the thyroid in your neck. Excuse me, the hypothalamus sends the TRH to the pituitary, which is, if you want to tap the center of your forehead right between your eyebrows, your pituitary sits right behind there. So the hypothalamus sends TRH to the pituitary. That tells the pituitary to secrete thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH, and that goes to your thyroid gland in your neck. And that tells your thyroid gland, hey, go secrete hormones. The hormones it secretes are T4 and T3. And then T4 and T3 are bound and inactive. They're bound to a protein. They have to be unbound and free. So you might see on some of your lab tests, FT4, FT3. That's the free, unbound, and possibly active form of the hormone. That happens in the periphery of your body and in your tissues. And then the other important part to know is that T3 is the most active form of the hormone. So the free T3 is really what creates a lot of the thyroid effect on your cells, a lot of the metabolism. And then your body has these really, really incredible ways of controlling how much thyroid hormone is active and free in your body. It can do this by not allowing it to be unbound, by keeping it bound and total and not free. It can do it even once you're in free T3 by reversing it and creating something called reverse T3. This happens with inflammation and other hormone imbalances. And then one of the main ways that the body controls the amount of thyroid hormone in your body is the pituitary. If you tap between your forehead, that gland, that master gland just behind the center of your eyebrows, it senses in your body, is there enough thyroid hormone out there? Do I need some more? If it senses you need some more, it's going to increase your TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone, to yell at the thyroid, hey, make more thyroid hormone. So, and we talk about diagnoses, we're going to understand that increased TSH means low thyroid hormone. It's inverse. So we'll get more to that later. And then the most important part is, which we don't have testing for and isn't really studied clinically, is that all this thyroid cascade and regulation is great to know about, but the action happens at the cell. The thyroid hormone, the free unbound thyroid hormone, needs to hit the cell, be attached to its receptor, and then that will create a signal that tells the cell to do its job. Hey, go do metabolism, increase my body temperature, give me energy, make my hair grow well. So that's really where the action happens. Okay, so what types of hypothyroidism are we aware of? A lot of you here, if you're hypothyroid, will be aware of Hashimoto's or primary hypothyroidism. This is when the thyroid is not able to put out enough thyroid hormone. So you'll see the TSH go up because the pituitary is yelling at the thyroid, put out more thyroid hormone, and you'll see the free or total T4 go down. There's also these other kinds that are not looked at very often, not in conventional medicine, and are even tricky to understand in functional medicine, secondary and tertiary. And this is when the hypothalamus or pituitary is basically given up, or there's a tumor preventing it from secreting its signaling hormones. So the hypothalamus is not signaling to the pituitary, or the pituitary is not signaling to the thyroid. And on these tests, as we'll see, you'll have normal amounts of TSH and you'll probably go undiagnosed. Okay, so Hashimoto's, it is the most common form. And most of people with Hashimoto's are women. It's about 75%. And it can be, it's widely undiagnosed according to statistics by many thyroid organizations. Importantly, the difference between Hashimoto's and primary and the other types is Hashimoto's has an autoimmune disease component to it. So autoimmunity means that your body, your immune system has, for some reason, which is another fascinating topic we won't dive into much today, has decided to create antibodies against your thyroid. And just like a little battle, these little thyroid antibodies are, just like in all of the spaceship movies, they've got their defense shield, and these antibodies are trying to break it down. And eventually, if the attack goes on long enough, your thyroid will be broken down. It will not be able to keep up its thyroid hormone output. So it's important to identify Hashimoto's hopefully early on before that happens. Okay, so we got that first part. So what happens then, as I've mentioned, your thyroid gland, because it's under attack, it is not able to put out thyroid hormone. Your pituitary, if you tap on your forehead between your eyebrows, that master gland, it will sense that in your body. Hey, there's not enough thyroid hormone out there. I'm going to just yell harder at the thyroid. I'm going to increase my TSH, my thyroid stimulating hormone, and say, hey, secrete more thyroid hormone. And that might work for a little while, but what you'll see over time is the TSH will go up, up, up as the thyroid hormone goes down. So yeah. So proper diagnosis here in conventional medicine, they'll wait for the TSH to go over 4.5. In functional medicine, we consider optimal thyroid range. So the difference between conventional and functional medicine ranges often is that in conventional medicine, the range is where disease is established. Okay, above 4.5, we know the disease is established. There's a disease process going on. Functional medicine doesn't want to wait for disease process to be established. We look at ranges. What actually is the range that equals health and vitality? So the ranges tend to be usually narrower. So we're going to investigate thyroid health if your TSH gets above 2.5, or sometimes even 2 if there's a lot of symptoms going on. Proper complete Hashimoto's diagnosis involves seeing if there's those thyroid antibodies being produced. Conventionally, this isn't often tested for, always tested for, because in a doctor deciding whether or not to run a lab, we want to think about, is the lab going to inform my ability to treat this person any differently or any better? In conventional medicine, the only treatment for low thyroid, hypothyroid, or increased TSH is to prescribe thyroid hormone, levothyroxine or Synthroid. That doesn't matter if there's an autoimmune Hashimoto's process or not. They don't do anything about the autoimmune process. So they don't necessarily care. It doesn't affect their treatment prescription, whether or not you have antibodies against your thyroid. We're much more concerned about that in functional medicine because there's things we do about the autoimmune process. And then in thyroid hormone levels, so in conventional, generally they'll just check a T4 or a free T4 because that is the main sign of whether or not the thyroid is putting out thyroid hormone. In functional medicine, we want to look at the whole thyroid cascade because science tells us that there can be many different things affecting conversion of total T4 to free T4 and total T3 to free T3 and into reverse T3 that we can do interventions on, that we can do something about. So we want a more complete picture of the whole thyroid hormone cascade. Okay, these secondary and tertiary ones, they're less common by conventional medicine standards. I would say that it's actually probably more common because this is often the result. Well, let me tell you what it is, sorry. As I talked about before, it means that the hypothalamus and pituitary are not secreting their signaling hormones. They are not telling their target glands, pituitary or target to secrete their hormones. So it'll be confusing. You might have a lot of low thyroid symptoms, but your TSH will not be elevated. It will be low. It will be, excuse me, normal or low. And you might be producing kind of relatively enough T4, but the cascade down the line could be suffering. Since your hypothalamus, which controls your pituitary, which is the master gland, is not signaling enough, that also means your pituitary is probably not signaling to all the other glands that it's the master gland controller of. So you could have hormonal dysregulations in other hormones, so cortisol or sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. In functional medicine, we look at this as happening in any long-term chronic health problem or severe inflammatory condition. There's actually a lot of research on what's called low T3 syndrome that happens when there's a lot of inflammation. When the body is sick, it wants to slow its thyroid down. It wants to conserve your metabolism. So what can happen in lots of inflammation, sickness, or long-term stress is the body will decrease hypothalamus, pituitary, and other hormone signaling in order to conserve. In conventional medicine, these are mostly looked at as the result of pituitary tumors suppressing signaling. So now we're going to kind of dive into, so you weren't hypothyroid before. What happened that made you hypothyroid? So we're going to dive into the biology of stress. So I'll give everybody a breath. Again, if we were in person, I would kind of check the audience, see how everyone's doing with all this information. And off we go. So we're going to talk about stressors. So the reason why you became hypothyroid or a lot of other health problems is because basically you had too many or too severe stressors and your body was not able to maintain the balance, the narrow range of homeostasis that it needs in order to keep you well. You know, for example, we need to be able to keep our body temperature in a very narrow range, a homeostatic range that is around about 98.6. If it drops or increases about 5 points, you're going to be very, very ill and potentially dead if it goes much farther. So really homeostasis and stress is just about understanding what stressors are going to force your body to take action, force your neuroendocrine immune system to create a coordinated response to respond to that stimuli in order to maintain you in the ranges to stay alive. So in functional medicine, we don't want to just maintain you in the ranges that are not dead or not horribly diseased. We're really looking at trying to maintain you in these biological, physiological ranges that are optimal wellness. So in short, when we have too many or too severe of these stressors, and our body is infinitely wise, it's always trying to maintain balance in the face of all of these different stressors. But eventually, if there's too much, that will manifest in our awareness as symptoms or disease. In stress, again, if we take sort of the emotional connotation, usually humans, we think about stress as always negative, but in stress research, it is just a stimuli. And in the physical world, especially related to hypothyroidism, obesity, a major stressor the body is constantly trying to maintain balance within, diabetes, excess alcohol consumption, improper diet, infections, a lack of sleep, and lack of or too much exercise, toxins, toxicants, pollutants. These are all things that your body can handle. It can buffer, it can maintain homeostasis for a certain amount of time, but eventually too much, and also as we get older, we are no longer able to maintain homeostasis in the face of too many stressors. And then a brief touch on a very important subject is mental and emotional stress is a biological phenomenon. There's no such thing as it's just in your head. If anyone or a doctor ever tells you that, you can tell them that in your head is a giant complex computer full of neurotransmitters, immune cells, tons of signaling, tons of electrical activity. There's tons of research on this. There is no such thing as the mind-body connection because that implies that there are not just one system to start with. What happens in your body and your mind is all one connected, communicating situation. Thoughts will affect your immune system will affect your thoughts. So this is also a very important topic for our overall health, and especially for thyroid and hormone health. So stress, also I want to again reiterate, is not a negative thing. It's just anything that causes your body to have to create a response to. And too little stress can be just as bad as too much stress. There is an optimal zone. For anyone who is ever an athlete growing up or currently, you know that you do hard workouts that stress your system. The entire point of those workouts is to tell your body, this is the new stimuli you need to adapt to. Your body then will adapt to that new stimuli, so you're at these improved levels. The whole point of stress is to allow your body to adapt to it. If you do not allow your body to recover and adapt to it, you will decompensate and you will get sick and fatigued, inflamed, and burn out. So your thyroid, it wasn't hypothyroid before, so something happened, too many stressors happened that made it so that your body could not maintain a healthy immune response and is now attacking your thyroid, or your hypothalamus and pituitary can no longer send proper amounts of signaling to them. So these are some of the main disruptors we're going to look at in relation to the thyroid that can dysregulate the thyroid. We're going to go over each of these, especially number 2. Okay, so we're going to begin now that I've given you enough background to understand why you were not hypothyroid before and how you became hypothyroid, and that's going to be important, hopefully, and also motivating you to do some of the treatment strategies we need in order to get you healthy and have a healthy thyroid again. What we talk about is, we all have what's called stress resilience. To be honest, I want most of us to be healthy, to be able to tolerate a little bit of not optimal living behaviors. So we're going to really talk about how full is your bucket. The more empty your bucket is of all of the things listed here, the more you're going to be able to recover from stressors. So in identifying how you became hypothyroid, my job as a functional medicine practitioner is to identify what's in your bucket, what filled it up, what caused the autoimmune response to start against your thyroid, what's propelling that, what other sources of inflammation are exacerbating that, what nutrient insufficiencies are making it so your thyroid doesn't have what it needs to function, and so forth. All right, so let's think about emptying your bucket. In conventional medicine, the standard treatment, the only treatment, if your TSH gets too high, you get thyroid hormone. And then if you follow up with your doctor, or if your doctor is good enough about reminding you to follow up with them, they will check your TSH maybe on your annual checkup, if you do your annual checkup, which you should, and then maybe also your T4 levels. And if it continues to creep up, they will increase your thyroid hormone. If your TSH goes down, they will decrease your thyroid hormone. And since thyroid, the processes that harm your thyroid are usually not static, people tend to go up and down on the same level of medication. So if you're someone who has been hypothyroid and been treated with medications for a while, you may have experienced that every time you go to your doctor, they're increasing or decreasing it because now it's a little different than it was before. Okay, excuse me. So the functional medicine approach, number 1, we figure out what's in your bucket. What's going on in there? What's dysregulating hormones and inflammation in your body and creating thyroid autoimmunity? Yes, we will prescribe thyroid hormone. So when all things are said and done, there may have been enough damage to your thyroid that we cannot reverse that, and you might then benefit significantly from thyroid hormone replacement. Armor is a big subject in integrative and functional and natural medicine. A lot of people think it's superior because it also supplies the free and active T3, and because it is from a natural source, usually pig thyroid gland. To be honest, since the body should know how to convert T4 into T3 according to its own mechanisms, I prefer to make sure that it can do that, that it can make its own T3 and not give the body T3 through armor. The things that stop T4 from being able to convert in a healthy amount to T3 include inflammation and cortisol, the adrenal hormone cortisol imbalances. So ideally, rather than just, giving them the fish, rather than giving them the T3, I'm going to correct the reason why their body is not able to create the correct amount of T3 on their own. That being said, there's people who live with chronic illness or chronic inflammation that maybe is not completely controlled, and they benefit tremendously from being on a T4, T3 combo. And then again, we will still monitor the thyroid hormone cascade, TSH, free and total T4 and T3, and reverse T3. Reverse T3 being too high is a sign that you have too much inflammation, cortisol imbalances, and we haven't taken care of it yet. And of course, optimize all the other areas of your health that can be affecting your thyroid health. All right, let's empty your bucket. What are some things that we can actually start doing today? We're going to talk about inflammation and one of my favorite topics, the gut microbiome. We're going to touch on briefly other sources of inflammation. We're going to look at nutrients. We're going to look at stress. So number one, the most important place we start with hypothyroidism is cleaning up the gut microbiome. This is a huge topic in and of itself, and if probably some of you I've already talked to extensively about this, but basically the entire world and everything on it, including us creatures, humans, are covered like moss with microbes. This is mostly bacteria, but includes everything else: yeast, fungus, viruses, retroviruses, things with parasites. Things we're just beginning to understand. Microbes got a really bad rap in the 20th century because it was when we first identified in medicine that microbes cause disease. Before, we didn't know why people dropped dead of a high fever. Now, in the 20th century, we finally recognized that it's because they had a bacterial or a viral infection. And we developed antibiotics and vaccines to prevent these microbes from being able to harm us or kill us. That's tremendous, but only a very, very, very small amount of microbes in the world are actually bad for human health. The vast majority are completely neutral or we actually need, we're symbiotic with. And also our body just has defenses and abilities to control it all the time. We are being bombarded by microbial assaults all of the time. That's what our immune system is for. That's what cytokines are for, to keep the balance. So why are we so obsessed with the gut microbiome? There's microbiomes all over your body. There's a unique eye microbiome and a unique belly button microbiome. So the reason why we're so interested in the gut microbiome is because 75% of the entire human immune system is in the gut. And I just learned from a vet that this is true for dogs and animals too. So that's pretty cool. And we are vastly outnumbered by microbial cells to our own cells with our own DNA. So the first thing in any inflammatory condition, and I think, yep, here's the slide that says that, including hypothyroidism, the first thing we do if you come in, we suspect or we diagnose you with hypothyroid, is we're going to clean up your gut. So how do we do that? Number one, our microbes eat what we eat. Our immune system will react to food that it does not identify, it does not like. We have to clean up our diet. This is absolutely foundational. And I like to take the judgment and the moral and the should out of it, that saying, don't shit on yourself. It's not that what you're eating is bad or immoral or you're a bad person. It's the fact is humans are just not adapted to the modern diet. For most of human history until about the mid 20th century, or even more recently, if you weren't in America in the mid 1950s or so, we did not have all this processed flour. We did not have access to sugar. It didn't really exist. There weren't chemicals in our food. There wasn't, genetically modified food, which may have saved many civilizations by being able to produce tons of food, but may also have some health impacts. So it's full of a lot of the major food intolerances and allergens. So we'll talk more about diet later on, but the important thing to recognize is that there is no such thing as a healthy processed diet. We really need to return to an unprocessed diet, and I usually start people on paleo. So that's one thing you can take note on if you're hypo and you haven't tried paleo yet. There's no one diet right for everybody. I'm not saying that at all, but paleo is a good place to start to get the processed junk out. Next, Diet is foundational. It is not in itself completely curative, not most of the time. It's incredibly helpful. So the next things we do is go directly to the gut microbiome. There's testing for this. I use stool analysis and breath testing to assess whether or not you have digestive insufficiencies, whether you have too many of the wrong kinds of bacteria, or not enough of the good bacteria. If you have too much of the bad ones, we will kill them. And if you don't have enough of the good ones, we will give you more of them. A lot of people are familiar with the term leaky gut. I hear this a lot. I have leaky gut. Zonulin is the molecule we'll use to test for that. However, the main way that we treat leaky gut is not with supplements, a lot of these natural supplements, it's by addressing your diet, your gut microbiome, and your digestion. We might use supplements temporarily in order to relieve symptoms, but ideally, if we address the first three, this will go away. And then with digestive health, it's important to recognize that the second most innervated place in the body after the brain is the gut. This isn't woo-woo, this is science. Your gut responds to stress. That's why they call it a visceral reaction. Okay, inflammation, the other 25%. Massively important, the gut, but there are that other 25%, we might need to look for infections or the sum total of infection burden that your body is trying to maintain homeostasis against. That's called the pathobiome. We might be looking for mold or mycotoxins in your environment, and other toxins and toxicants, heavy metals or non-heavy metal chemical toxicants that will push your body out of homeostasis and can create inflammation and autoimmune reactions. Nutrients. The reason why vitamins, minerals, antioxidants are important is because they are cofactors to make your machinery work. So your car can't work if it doesn't have the belts and pulleys and screws. I know nothing about cars, but this metaphor works, I know. You just need the right cofactors in order to make your machinery work. This is my favorite little metaphor for this. For those of you that are old enough, Lucy and Ethel in the chocolate factory. So how much nutrients you have is not a black and white issue. Your nutrients are necessary for the machinery to function your body, which is basically your chemistry. And your body will keep up, even with low nutrients, for a little while until the environmental burden becomes too much. So if you remember in this little skit, while the conveyor belt, while the environment was nice and slow and not too taxing, Ethel and Lucy could keep up. They could keep up with the environmental burden. But let's say, they're not very competent. They don't have all the nutrients they need to work well. And as that environment becomes faster, as that burden increases, they will not be able to come up and disease and symptoms will appear. So what can you do to take action today? So empty your bucket. We're going to talk about, I call these the 4 foundations. This is really important to do, even if you never see a doctor or functional medicine practitioner. These are the things that you will do in order to really improve your health. Number 1, your diet. If you're not already on some sort of paleo-esque way of eating that is mostly plant-based and includes a lot of nutrient-dense foods, that is the place to start right now. It's not just about what you're not eating, it's about what you're including. So not eating sugar and flours isn't enough. You want to make sure you're getting lots of nutrient-dense food, shellfish if you tolerate it, organ meats, eggs, cooking with the whole animal, the bones, eating all of the parts of the animal where all lots of the nutrients are, and of course tons and tons of plants. As Michael Pollan says, it's pretty simple. What should we eat? Eat real food, mostly plants. Include herbs and spices. These have phytonutrients that aren't classified under vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, and drink plenty of fresh filtered water. Also importantly, slow down, eat mindfully. Allow that nervous system of your gut to relax and spend its time digesting. Sleep and relaxation. The CDC has declared a sleep epidemic. So we're in the midst of a COVID pandemic right now. Sleep, research science tells us, is having a huge impact on our health. Obesity, accidents, work function, inflammation, heart disease, diabetes. Lack of sleep is a major social burden because of the negative effects it has on our health. We need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. maybe a little more this time of year. It can be seasonal, maybe a little less in the summer. If you're getting less than 8 hours of sleep on the regular, you're kidding yourself. So there are people that do have optimal health on 5 to 6 hours of sleep. Statistically, they're very rare. It's a very small percentage of the population, and you are unlikely statistically to be one of them. So get your sleep. Foundational. You don't have to spend any money or see any brilliant specialists to improve your health by sleeping enough. Movement. We need exercise for our health. We have to create these adaptations. Exercise stimulates the brain and keeps it sharp, improves our cognition. It stimulates hormones. The best way, if you want to improve testosterone and growth hormone as a man or as a woman, is actually exercise. That's the way to do it. We want to do a cardiovascular exercise, and we want to make sure we get our heart rate up a little bit. Not too low, it's not just a stroll, and then not too high. Don't go out and do HIIT, high intensity interval training, Orange Theory every day. That's saved for maybe twice a week. Strength training, 20 to 30 minutes is sufficient a couple times a week. That's great for basic fitness. Work with a personal trainer or someone else educated to make sure that you're doing it properly and you don't injure yourself, and have good exercises to do. And then there's this topic, sitting is the new smoking. Exercise is not a replacement for daily functional activity. I don't know about you guys, but my ancestors were not kings and queens. We worked all day, and humans are adapted to be moving off and on frequently throughout the day. If you're not sure if you're moving enough, let's say maybe you're exercising 5 times a week, you've got that dialed in, get a step counter. You might be sitting 8 to 10 hours a day and not realize that you're actually very sedentary. Consider a standing desk as well. Stress, mental and emotional health. This is a huge topic, but we can get in all sorts of personal reasons why this is a good idea, but I want to stick in this talk to basic biology. Long-term stress, whether it is mental or emotional, will dysregulate your thyroid. So I'll get patients who, they're doing everything right. They are eating well and exercising, they've been working on their sleep, but they are stressed all day long. Their mind is racing. They're doing too many things. They have unhealthy relationships. Your thyroid will suffer. Your other hormones will suffer. You won't feel well. And then one of the other interesting things that COVID has pointed out is how much humans absolutely need connection and support. There's actually tons of research on this. Babies will not thrive if they're not held. The elderly get sick and do not survive as long without connection and support. Humans do better when we have healthy connections and support. So again, really, really important for hormonal health and nervous system health and immune health. So functional medicine, now that we've got all the foundations in, we can talk about sort of the nitty-gritty testing. We test far more advanced hormone panels. I really like the Drive Urine Test for Complete Hormones, or Dutch. They have a way where we can compare the total cortisol to the free cortisol that tells me whether or not your thyroid hormone is actually affecting your cell in the way that it needs. If your free cortisol is much higher than your total cortisol, then it is quite likely, whatever your thyroid test might tell us, that your cells are not getting the message. The thyroid hormone is not affecting them. So I love running this on hypothyroid people or people who are fatigued, to even if their thyroid hormone levels testing are normal, to see if there's something subclinical going on that we need to pick up on. And then of course, as I mentioned before, we look at more hormones in areas down the thyroid cascade, including free and total T4 and T3 and reverse T3. Then some people are surprised when they come into a functional medicine person, when they come see me for hypothyroid, because I'm like, you're going to poop in a box and we're going to test your gut microbiome. It is absolutely essential. We have to clear that hurdle. I have to know that your gut microbiome isn't dysbiotic, doesn't have too much of the bad guys, isn't inflamed, isn't full of yeast. Treating this alone is absolutely pivotal for people that it is affecting in improving their thyroid health. And if you have Hashimoto's, you have autoimmune hypothyroid, this can be absolutely pivotal in improving your thyroid functioning and reducing the autoimmune attack. We look at measures for inflammation, as mentioned there, and we might look for infections, both directly, or antibody levels like people are now aware of with COVID, looking for IgG and IgM, and testing immunoglobulins, making sure your immune system is functioning. All right, we're almost there. I know we're getting close to the end here. Nutrients, antioxidants, minerals. One of the main reasons people also can come to a functional medicine person is they want to know which supplements and herbs should they actually be spending money on. Nutrients vastly important to thyroid function. A lot of people are familiar with iodine, but we want to think about antioxidants and B vitamins necessary for cellular health so that your cells can do what your thyroid is telling them to. And we use testing to determine that, so we don't have to guess. And this same testing will also tell us about your toxin detox burden and how well your cells are able to produce energy. So down the line, again, as we study the thyroid hormone cascade and all these other things that infect it, like inflammation, we need to see if your cells are getting the message from your thyroid. Are they having good amounts, healthy, proper energy metabolism? We'll look at food intolerances. Mainly, I actually just have people change their diet. If we need to dive more deeply after that into food intolerances, we will. If allergies are a big part of the person's symptomatology, I'll send them to an allergist and get proper, thorough allergy testing. We need to eliminate those things from the person's body so that their immune system's not constantly freaking out about that. That will severely affect your thyroid health. And then we might even look at whether or not they're being exposed to contaminants in their environment. Mold is a big one, and water as well. So in short, that's basically what we do. Is if you came to me as a functional medicine patient, we would take a huge dive into your medical history, and we decide what labs we need in order to help understand what's going on in your body, where your bucket is being filled up. And then the process is to use the lab testing and clinical evaluation of your life and your medical history to understand what's filling up your bucket, removing those things, and then supporting the body to heal from any damage that they have done and to optimize your wellness. Okay, guys, we made it. Thanks so much. That's a lot of information. I know this webinar will be put up on the website in a few days, so you can go back over it as well. So thanks everyone for your attention, and thank you, Derek.
Yeah, and we will, certainly get to a couple of the questions as well. I also encourage you, when we do wrap up, there will be a short exit poll. Just let us know how we're doing, and let us know if you have any follow-up questions or would like anybody to reach out, contact you with some to get further information. We'd be happy to do that. But to that end, let's go ahead and jump to a couple of the questions. I'll paraphrase here, but I've been on thyroid meds and still don't feel well. Any suggestions based on a prior diagnosis?
Yeah, and that's a great question. That's probably the majority of people who are interested in something like this. So as we explained, it's really important to replace thyroid hormone. I'm not anti-pharmaceutical at all. If your thyroid is to the point where it can no longer do it on its own. But if you're, one part of your body, your thyroid, one part of your city isn't working well, it's quite likely there's other parts that are not working well. So adrenal cortisol production, inflammation, and then all of the diet and lifestyle stuff are likely out of balance. So most people don't feel miraculously better 100% on just thyroid hormone. So we'll need to think about the other things that are dysregulating your health. You can't hang it on just the thyroid by itself.
Mm-hmm. Related to that, someone was asking specifically about meds. If they've started those meds already, is there a way to get off of those meds once they've started them?
Yeah, great question. There might be. That's pretty individualized. So through the process, we'll try to identify, what's filling up your bucket and eliminate any of the current things that could be dysregulating your thyroid and or led to your low thyroid functioning. And then from there, we get to see. A lot of people, I've definitely gotten people off of thyroid medication. Their thyroid is able to bounce back and do its job once we took the burden off of it. But it can be really important to stay on it, and it can be really, really helpful. And the other point is, once we've emptied your bucket, you're going to feel good on thyroid hormone instead of just, maybe a little bit better. And you're going to be able to stay at stable levels of your thyroid hormone instead of going up and down or constantly up over the years. So it's pretty individual. We can get people off thyroid hormone, but I'm also, it can be a great thing to be on thyroid hormone. We just want to stop whatever is causing the thyroid to be low and make sure we can stabilize the condition.
Mm-hmm. Great. And a couple more questions have come in. So someone is talking symptomatically about thyroid nodules, but that their thyroid test has come back normal. What's the next step? How do they address something like that?
Yeah, wonderful question. So I mean, in America, we mainly don't talk about goiter. So of course, we want to be checked for goiter if that is going on with your thyroid. That's usually an iodine deficiency that is more common when nutrition is very poor. For nodules, that puts you on the Hashimoto's category. But we want to monitor those, make sure that if we need to biopsy them, that there isn't any sort of cancer going on. But the reason why you might have nodules but still perfectly functioning thyroid is because it just has not yet degraded the thyroid's ability to put out thyroid hormone yet. So, I can be getting away with some negative stimuli that could eventually cause my thyroid not to be able to keep up, but it might take a while. And then the other thing is to make sure that we're looking at your thyroid tests under functional medicine ranges for optimal wellness, and not the broader conventional medicine ranges, which will allow things to get dysregulated to the point of disease before calling it hypothyroid. So it may be that it's just not affected your thyroid yet, which is great, and that gives us more time to take action and hopefully prevent you needing thyroid hormone. But we also want to consider that maybe you are hypothyroid and it's just not being recognized because of the broader testing ranges.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. Yeah, and we have another one, sort of fascinating question. So someone is saying that they have been tested, do have the antibodies, but their thyroid function is still normal, and they are experiencing the opposite of the typical Hashimoto symptoms that you described.
Okay, so you're maybe, if I would ask the person, and maybe you're experiencing more hyperthyroid, way too hot, losing weight despite eating, maybe can't sleep, having anxiety that's purely biological, not driven by, stressful events. So the hyperthyroidism is also an autoimmune process. So today's talk about hypothyroidism, but you need to be looked at for Graves then to see if you're hyperthyroid. You'd want to have probably take immediate action to prevent the effects of that, but then the process is the same. We want to understand if you're hypothyroid, what's propelling the autoimmune attack, and again, look in your bucket, see what's filling it up, what could have triggered this autoimmune response, and calm down any other inflammation in the body that could be exacerbating it.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And then, I want to be mindful of time. We're hitting our 1 p.m. We have one or two other questions sort of outstanding out there, but we can follow up on those. Happy to follow up on those via email, etc. But if you had a question today and you're interested in following up with Tressa and having some further discussion, please just note that as you log out, you'll be prompted with a 3-question little questionnaire. We'd love to hear from you, and look forward to the next one of these. Tressa, thanks so much for packing all that into an hour, which is great, and just a wealth of information. And one of the things that stands out to me as I've watched a few of these webinars that you've given, Tressa, has been that, and it's no surprise that we aren't a collection of independent parts, right? It's how interwoven the cause and effect of hypothyroidism and gut health and all of the other factors that you've addressed, how they all tie back to a number of key things that that you help patients address.
Yeah.
So
absolutely, we got to think about everything and how it works together.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you everybody who attended, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.
Yeah, thanks for everyone's attention today. Hopefully it gave you some things you can take action on right now, and if you need any more other help, we'll be here.
Thank you.